Welcome to another deep dive. Today's journey is, well, it's tailor-made for you, the learner. So imagine looking at your life.
Right.
The advanced degrees, the promotions, the impeccable relationships, just the sheer competence you project every single day.
Oh, absolutely. The perfect picture.
Exactly. And then realizing with the sudden sinking feeling that you haven't actually built a successful life at all, you've built a five-star prison.
That is such a vivid way to put it.
I mean, the amenities are fantastic, right? Everyone admires the architecture, but you are just suffocating inside.
It is a genuinely terrifying moment of clarity because our entire culture is, it's geared toward helping people construct an identity, achieving milestones, becoming somebody.
Yeah.
But nobody hands you a manual for what to do when you succeed so thoroughly at becoming that person
Right.
that you literally get trapped inside the character.
Which brings us to our source material for today. We are pulling apart a truly fascinating set of excerpts from a text called The Book of Unbecoming by Max and Claude.
It's quite a read.
It really is. The mission of this deep dive is to explore this radical concept of self-dissolution and really extract the tools the authors provide for dismantling that cage of success. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the text starts with a highly provocative warning.
It does, right on the first page.
Yeah, it explicitly tells the reader that if they are currently looking for scaffolding to build their identity, they need to close the book immediately.
What's fascinating here is the authors operate with what they call a warm precision. That tone just strikes you immediately.
Warm precision, I like that.
Yeah, they completely refuse to coddle the reader. By issuing that warning, they're treating you as an adult who is totally capable of bearing difficult truths.
Right.
The assumption is that you have already achieved mastery over your life. They respect that mastery way too much to offer comfortable platitudes. They're basically saying, we see your beautiful cell, we acknowledge how hard you work to build it, but we are here to talk about the lack of oxygen.
I love that. But before we start swinging sledgehammers at the walls of this cell, we need to figure out if we are actually trapped in a rigid identity. Or, if we just really need a vacation.
Exactly. You have to know the difference.
So the authors lay out a diagnostic criteria, but they mandate a hard stop before looking at any existential issues. They insist on checking for clinical depression first.
Which is so important. Applying a philosophical solution to a physiological or chemical imbalance is just dangerous.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Because the symptoms often mimic one another. The anhedonia, that persistent sense of wrongness, the lethargy. If your brain chemistry is failing to produce serotonin, dismantling your identity is only going to accelerate a crisis.
You have to rule out the medical side.
Right. Only when you are confident that your despair is existential do you move to their specific signs of imprisonment.
Okay, so the first existential sign they point to is when your competence actually becomes your imprisonment. You are so exceptionally good at your role that you've become human infrastructure.
That's a great term. Human infrastructure.
Yeah, people rely on you the way a city relies on a power grid. You can't just step back to explore a new hobby or, lower your output without causing massive disruption to your family or your company.
Your excellence literally becomes the lock on the door. The underlying mechanism here is that your current hypercompetent self occupies so much psychological and social real estate that it eats your imagination.
Wow. Eats your imagination.
You cannot envision an alternative way of living. Your current life demands 100% of your bandwidth just to maintain the infrastructure you built.
And I think that flows perfectly into the second sign, which borrows from the philosopher Charles Taylor and his concept of authenticity.
Yes.
The authors describe this state where your identity is completely legible to everyone else, but it's totally opaque to you.
Right. Everyone else has you figured out.
Exactly. Your colleagues, your spouse, your friends, they know exactly what you'll say in a meeting, what your political takes are, how you're going to react to a crisis. But internally, you feel like a stranger operating a meat suit.
What Charles Taylor illuminated is this tension between our inner resonance and our outward performance. When you are highly legible to society, society rewards you with praise, money, stability.
Sure.
So you get locked into a feedback loop of performing the version of yourself that receives those rewards. And eventually, you are performing a role that is entirely true to who you were a decade ago. But you have fundamentally outgrown it.
The applause is for a ghost.
Exactly.
It makes me think of an actor cast as the lead in a hit Broadway show. I mean, it is the role of a lifetime. It's everything you ever worked for. But after 5,000 performances of the exact same lines, hitting the exact same marks on the stage every single night, the dream becomes a life sentence.
Well, that's spot on.
You're getting standing ovations, the reviews are glowing, but inside, you are just a machine running on autopilot waiting for the curtain to drop.
Let's push that Broadway analogy a step further,
Yeah.
because it perfectly illustrates the third sign of the cage, which is the cessation of growth due to arrival. Yes, you've arrived at the destination. The show is a hit. There is literally nowhere else to ascend. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote profoundly about this. We typically think of despair as failing to become who we are.
Right, like not reaching our potential.
Exactly. But Kierkegaard argued that a deeper, much more agonizing despair is the failure to become the self you could be.
Oh, wow.
You summit the mountain, you look around, and instead of a breathtaking view, you see a flat, endless plateau of stasis. It's a death of possibility.
And that feeling of stasis, it leads to the ultimate, probably most irrational diagnostic sign the text mentions. Envying people who are completely lost.
Yes, the envy of the lost.
You see a 22-year-old with no money, no career path, making terrible decisions, and you feel this deep, aching jealousy. Because their story is still being written. But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
We always romanticize what we don't have, right? I mean, isn't envying a lost person just a classic grass is always greener scenario?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sharp distinction the authors draw between rational envy and this specific existential envy. Rational envy is desiring a tangible upgrade to your current reality.
Like wanting a larger salary.
Right, a larger salary, a nicer home, a healthier body. It's wanting something you genuinely do not possess. But the person who has arrived already possesses the ability to be lost.
Wait, what do you mean?
Technically, you could walk into your office tomorrow, quit your job, abandon your lease, and be completely adrift by noon. You have full access to that state.
Okay, but you don't do it.
You don't do it because you feel internally forbidden. The envy you feel toward the lost person isn't a desire for their actual messy life. It's a map of your own prison drawn from the inside.
Oh, man. That is heavy.
The jealousy reveals the exact dimensions of your internal prohibitions. You are physically free, but you are psychologically barricaded.
So once that realization hits, once you see the brick wall in front of the open door, the immediate visceral instinct is just to panic. You want to blow the whole thing up. Buy a one-way ticket to Bali, shave your head, burn the bridges. But the text treats that urgency as a massive red flag.
It's a huge red flag. Unbecoming without preparation is not liberation. It is simply a psychological breakdown. The authors offer a very structured framework to prevent this, and they divide the necessary preparation into 4 distinct categories.
Okay.
The first is material preparation. They do not romanticize poverty or instability. Unbecoming is a luxury that requires financial runway and unstructured time.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you are living paycheck to paycheck, deliberately reducing your functional output is catastrophic.
Yeah.
You must build a material cushion first.
Yeah, if your identity is a towering skyscraper, you don't just set fire to the lobby. That's a chaotic collapse. It's more like a controlled demolition in a crowded city.
Right.
You have to clear the blast radius. If you bring down the building recklessly, you destroy the neighboring structures. You know, your family's security, your children's stability, your own health. You have to take it down floor by floor, carefully pulling out the wiring before you remove the steel beams.
I love that analogy. The material safety net prevents the collateral damage. But material wealth cannot protect you from the social blowback. Which brings us to relational preparation.
This one is tough.
It really is. You have to find witnesses.
Yeah.
This is incredibly difficult because most of your friends and family are fixers. They love the shape you currently occupy.
Because it works for them.
Exactly. So when you begin to dissolve that shape, it threatens their reality. Their anxiety will drive them to try to put you back into your familiar box. A witness is a rare individual who can watch you change, watch you struggle, without needing your transformation to resolve immediately for their own comfort.
And then you also need psychological preparation. This is understanding the nuanced difference between a chosen directional unbecoming, where you are systematically dismantling your ego, and a non-directional breakdown, where you just lose the fundamental ability to care for yourself and function in reality.
And that psychological grounding relies heavily on the final pillar, spiritual preparation. The authors mandate cultivating a contemplative presence, specifically through a meditation practice established for 6 to 12 months before attempting the deep work of self-dissolution.
6 to 12 months. They really want you grounded.
Yeah, this is entirely about preparing for what the philosopher Martin Heidegger called thrownness.
Heidegger's thrownness. That's like Imagine waking up midair, falling out of an airplane with absolutely no memory of how you got there or where the ground is,
Yeah.
just that dizzying, terrifying vertigo. Heidegger suggests that is the baseline reality of human existence when we strip away the comforting illusions of our titles, our jobs, and our societal roles. We are just thrown into the world.
That's right.
So the meditation practice isn't designed to relax you, it's designed to weave a parachute for that specific vertigo.
Precisely.
And even if you're listening to this right now and thinking, well, I am not ready to blow up my life and unbecome today, building this material and spiritual stability is a profoundly powerful insurance policy. It gives you options.
Always good to have options.
So, assuming the foundation is secure and the blast radius is clear, the text offers some practical, low-stakes experiments to test the structural integrity of the self. The first, loosenings.
These exercises act as empirical tests of your own psychological flexibility. The first one is the inventory of unchosen inheritances.
Okay.
You sit down and exhaustively list everything about your identity that you did not consciously choose. Your physical body, your native language, your baseline nervous system sensitivity, your attachment style, and even the bedrock values you hold dear.
When you really sit with that, it is a remarkably heavy lift. You start realizing that so much of what you defend as you is just an accident of geography and parental projection.
It really humbles you.
And the next experiment targets our routines, the suspension of habit. You identify one core identity-linked habit. Maybe it's your religious adherence to a 5 a.m. run, or your deep pride in always being the most punctual person in the room, and you simply stop doing it for 1 week.
Just cold turkey.
Yeah. The goal isn't to permanently change your routine, but to strictly observe the intense psychological discomfort of not performing that identity.
The discomfort reveals how much we rely on actions to validate our existence. And building on that friction is the experiment in perspective.
This one is wild.
You deliberately inhabit a genuinely opposing worldview for a single day. The authors suggest this as a purely cognitive workout. Now, we're not taking sides here, just explaining the book's exercise.
Right, strictly impartial here.
So if your media diet and voting record are deeply progressive, you spend a day fully immersed in conservative thought. If you are entirely secular, you spend a day attempting to view the world through the lens of devout religious faith. The objective is not to convert you, and it has nothing to do with validating the opposing view.
It is an exercise in separating your core self from your positions. We wrap our identities so tightly around our beliefs that an attack on the belief feels like a physical threat.
Exactly.
Trying on the opposing view proves that you are a consciousness holding a position, not the position itself. But here's where it gets really interesting. The fourth practice. The fast from self-reference. Going one full 24-hour day without using the words I, me, my, or mine.
It's harder than it sounds.
I mean, I spent a good hour trying to figure out how you even order a coffee or send a basic work email without using the word I. Do you say one would desire a latte?
A latte is required by this vessel.
Yes, it sounds completely impossible and slightly unhinged.
But the awkwardness of the phrasing is the entire point of the exercise. When you forcefully remove the first-person pronoun from your vocabulary, you are backed into a corner of passive constructions and third-person observation.
Like saying, the project will be completed by Tuesday instead of I will finish the project?
Exactly. What this fast exposes is the staggering amount of daily energy we spend reflexively asserting our existence to the world. We are in a constant state of declaring, I am here. This is my unique perspective. This event affects me in this specific way.
It is exhausting once you notice it. You are constantly painting a giant target on yourself.
By pausing that relentless performance of self-declaration, you begin to access a very quiet, enduring presence. You get a taste of the consciousness that persists underneath the noise of the ego.
Testing the walls with these exercises reveals that the self is vastly more flexible than we assume. You can survive, not saying I for a day, you can survive missing the 5 a.m. run, but those are just the decorative fixtures.
Right.
Now, the deep dive moves into the structural, load-bearing pillars of identity, the heavy roles we play.
This is the editing process of your own life narrative, starting with resignation from roles. You take an explicit, communicated sabbatical from being the responsible one, or the family fixer, or the office peacemaker. You look at the people who rely on that unspoken contract, and you tell them you are stepping back.
Yeah.
And you have to endure their pushback, their anger, their confusion. Because from their perspective, you are breaking the rules of the relationship.
Which naturally leads to the examination of success, or what the authors brilliantly call the archaeology of no.
I love that phrase.
You dig through the strata of your achievements to see which ones were genuinely driven by passion and which were driven by a sheer terror of inadequacy. You identify all the past commitments where your enthusiastic yes was really just an internalized inability to say no.
It's very confronting.
It's like looking at your life's pristine resume and realizing half the jobs were accepted at gunpoint by your own internal anxieties.
That is a brutal but immensely clarifying realization. When you see that your success was largely a trauma response, it strips away the reverence you hold for your own achievements.
Yeah.
And that pairs directly with the practice of deliberate incompetence. You take a task that you are highly praised for, and you execute it poorly.
On purpose.
On purpose. You stay within safe limits, you don't endanger anyone or get yourself fired, but you do it badly enough to invite criticism.
It sounds absurd, deliberately turning in a B- report when you are an A+ employee. But the mechanism behind it is profound. You are physically proving to your nervous system that failure is not an existential death sentence.
Exactly.
You survive being bad at something, and all of this deliberate dismantling strips away your armor, leaving you in what the text calls the middle passage, the void.
The void is the agonizing gap between the old self you just demolished and whatever comes next. It is the experience of the shelf that used to hold all your beliefs, roles, and achievements, suddenly holding nothing.
And the human mind despises the void.
It will panic. It will try to frantically sell you a new, equally rigid identity to stop the vertigo. The mind says, oh, I was suffocating as a corporate lawyer because I am actually meant to be an artisanal woodworker in Vermont.
Yes. The trap is swapping one cage for another with better scenery. The difficult work of the void is refusing to buy that new identity. You have to stay in the witness position.
Just observe.
The poet Rainer Maria Rilke famously advised a young writer to live the questions rather than demanding immediate answers that they couldn't possibly understand yet. You have to sit in the question mark.
To build stamina for that question mark, the authors prescribe purposeful purposelessness. You carve out one day a week to do absolutely nothing useful.
Nothing at all.
No chores, no networking disguised as grabbing coffee, no reading books on self-improvement, radical, unapologetic inutility.
I feel anxious just thinking about it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see why this induces so much panic. Our society runs on a very simple equation. Worth equals output. If you are producing, you matter.
If you aren't producing, you are a ghost.
Breaking that equation is the ultimate act of rebellion for the high achiever. Sitting in a room for an entire day, producing nothing, solving nothing, and realizing that you still exist and still have intrinsic value without generating output. That fundamentally rewires your brain.
So, if you manage to survive the void, if you resist the desperate urge to immediately become a new, heavily defined persona, what does the other side actually look like? When the dust of the demolition settles, what remains?
What emerges from the rubble is what the authors term provisional identity.
Yeah.
You don't become a blank slate. You still retain your hard-earned skills. You still have preferences for certain foods or music. You're still recognizable to your friends.
Okay, that's reassuring.
But the relationship to those traits changes. You wear them like clothes, changing them as needed rather than mistaking them for your skin. They no longer define your absolute essence.
Which opens the door to responsive existence. Instead of navigating a situation by asking, what does a person in my historical role typically do here? You simply look at what the immediate moment actually requires and act accordingly. It brings this incredible comfort with paradox. You realize you can be deeply spiritual and fiercely pragmatic. You can be immensely generous while maintaining impenetrable boundaries. It isn't a glitch in your personality. It is just the reality of being a complex, unbound human. So what does this all mean for the listener?
It's the ultimate question.
The ultimate reward of unbecoming isn't a state of endless happiness or a friction-free life. It's a profound lightness. You walk through the world less defended. Ironically, you become far more resilient to failure, because failing at a task is no longer an indictment of your soul. It's just a task that didn't work out.
It's a beautiful, hard-won irony. You don't become someone new and improved. You become someone willing to be perpetually uncertain about who you are.
Yeah.
And that spacious uncertainty allows for a much more genuine, vibrant connection to the present moment.
Beautiful.
But the authors caution that this requires the long practice. The ego will constantly, quietly try to solidify again. Unbecoming isn't a one-time event that you cross off a list. It is a seasonal maintenance of keeping your grip loose.
That makes sense.
This is why finding that community of witnesses, people who don't need you to be solid and predictable, is vital for sustaining this lightness for the rest of your life.
If you are listening to this right now and you have ever felt trapped by your own excellent decisions, I hope this validates your experience. You aren't crazy.
Not at all.
That persistent, haunting feeling of wrongness you experience when everything looks absolutely right on paper. It isn't a lack of gratitude, it isn't a character flaw. It might simply be the call to loosen your agonizing grip on the character you've been playing for so long.
This raises an important question, something for you to mull over today, which builds on a brief observation the authors make regarding historical privilege. The hyper-individualized modern Western world is the architect of this specific, achievement-oriented prison.
Right.
We have to wonder, what would a society look like that didn't require its citizens to build such rigid, heavily defended selves just to survive? If we raised children without equating their fundamental worth to their legibility and their economic output, would the painful process of unbecoming even need to exist?
That is a profound thought to leave on. We spend so much of our energy obsessively perfecting our performance in that Broadway show, terrified of forgetting our lines or missing our marks, that we completely forget we were the ones who wrote the script in the first place.
Exactly.
We have the power to write a new one, or better yet, we can just step off the stage and see what happens in the quiet of the empty theater. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to carve out a moment of purposeful purposelessness today. Put down the heavy machinery of your identity just for an hour and see what happens when you just are.